Question 1. What is the primary advantage of using Azure Private Link for accessing Azure PaaS services like Azure SQL Database or Azure Storage? Option A. It allows direct access to the services from the public internet without any firewall rules. Option B. It enables service traffic to traverse the public internet with enhanced encryption. Option C. It establishes a secure, private connection where traffic between your virtual network and the service remains entirely within the Azure Backbone network. Option D. It automatically replicates data across multiple Azure regions for disaster recovery. The correct answer is it establishes a secure, private connection where traffic between your virtual network and the service remains entirely within the Azure Backbone network. Here's the explanation. Private Link's core advantage is providing private connectivity to Azure PaaS services, ensuring all traffic stays within the secure Microsoft Backbone network and never traverses the public internet, enhancing security and compliance. Options A and B are incorrect, as Private Link aims to remove public internet exposure. Option D is a feature of services, not Private Link itself. Question 2. In an Azure Private Link configuration, where is the private endpoint typically deployed, and where is the Private Link service typically configured? Option A. Both Private Endpoint and Private Link service are in the consumer's virtual network. Option B. Both Private Endpoint and Private Link service are in the provider's virtual network. Option C. The Private Endpoint is in the consumer's virtual network, and the Private Link service is in the provider's virtual network. Option D. The Private Endpoint is in the provider's virtual network, and the Private Link service is in the consumer's virtual network. The correct answer is, quote, the private endpoint is in the consumer's virtual network, and the Private Link service is in the provider's virtual network. Here's the explanation. The private endpoint is created by the consumer in their virtual network to establish the private connection. The Private Link service is created by the service provider, or internal team hosting the service, in their virtual network to expose their service privately. Question 3. Why is proper DNS configuration essential for a Private Link connection to function correctly? Option A. To ensure that the service's FQDN resolves to its public IP address for external access. Option B. To allow the private endpoint to communicate with the Private Link service over the public internet. Option C. To ensure that the service's FQDN resolves to the private IP address of the private endpoint within the consumer's VNet. Option D. To automatically provision the Private Link service without manual approval. The correct answer is to ensure that the service's FQDN resolves to the private IP address of the private endpoint within the consumer's VNet. Here's the explanation. Without correct DNS configuration, e.g. using a private DNS zone, client applications would attempt to resolve the service's FQDN to its public IP address, bypassing the private endpoint and defeating the purpose of Private Link. DNS ensures traffic is directed to the private IP. Question 4. A company needs to configure DNS for both their public-facing website, example.com, and for internal name resolution of virtual machines within their Azure virtual networks. Which combination of Azure DNS zone types should they use? Option A. One public DNS zone for both public and private resolution. Option B. One private DNS zone for both public and private resolution. Option C. A public DNS zone for example.com and a private DNS zone for internal VNet resolution. Option D. Azure DNS private resolver for both public and private resolution. The correct answer is a public DNS zone for example.com and a private DNS zone for internal VNet resolution. Here's the explanation. Public DNS zones are for internet accessible domains, while private DNS zones are specifically designed for name resolution within and across Azure virtual networks. Keeping internal DNS data private is serve distinct purposes. Question 5. An Azure architect is configuring a public DNS zone for a web application hosted on an Azure public IP address. The architect wants the DNS record to automatically update if the public IP address changes due to a redeployment or scaling event. Which type of DNS record set should be used? Option A address record set. Option B, CNAME canonical name record set. Option C, alias record set. Option D, TXT text record set. The correct answer is alias record set. Here's the explanation. Alias record sets are a powerful feature in Azure DNS that allow a DNS record to point to an Azure resource, like a public IP address. The alias record automatically tracks the IP address changes of the target Azure resource, eliminating manual DNS updates. Question 6. For a private DNS zone to enable name resolution for virtual machines within an Azure virtual network, what critical configuration step must be performed? Option A. The private DNS zone must be delegated at the domain registrar. Option B. The virtual network must be linked to the private DNS zone. Option C. A public IP address must be assigned to the private DNS zone. Option D. DNSSEC must be enabled on the private DNS zone. The correct answer is the virtual network must be linked to the private DNS zone. Here's the explanation. Private DNS zones require virtual networks to be explicitly linked to them. This link enables VMs within those VNets to resolve records in the private DNS zone. Delegation A is for public zones. Public IPC is not applicable, and DNSSECD is not natively supported by Azure DNS. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to my channel.